You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Friday, January 11th, 2019. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we have been talking about holiness. We talked about how becoming holy means becoming more like God and less trapped in sin. We become more like God, who is love, who is mercy, and who is faithful. We also talked about how becoming like God means that we need to let Him take control and that He is at the door of our heart knocking. We simply need to let Him in. We also took a pointer from St. Therese and St. Mother Teresa of Calcutta that when we strive for holiness, we are not striving for success, but we are determining to be faithful. Yesterday, we started talking about the concept of virtue, which is how we break down holiness into smaller categories so that we can really examine our life and quest after it. We talked about the three theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. These are the topics that we are going to be covering on the coming weeks of Catholic Sprouts. But before we dive into the specifics of faith, hope, and love, let's talk about virtue a little bit. Now, one of my favorite ways to describe virtue comes from St. Therese. St. Therese talks about when we have a virtue, even when we're naturally good at something, we should not take pride in that. For example, there are some people that are just naturally more cheerful and naturally more pleasant and loving towards other people. There's others that can be kind of moody and mean. But we should never take pride in the fact that we have a certain virtue, because she told us to think about it this way. A virtue is a gift from God, and it's very much like a gift that you place into the hands of a child. Now, if you have a younger brother or sister, and they've ever gotten their hands on anything that you think is valuable and wonderful, then you know what usually happens to it. When a little baby gets something, oftentimes they suck on it, it gets goobery, maybe it's suddenly sticky for some reason you don't know, or it gets lost, right? But that is how it is with a virtue. God has this precious gift, because remember, holiness is a gift from God. It's not something that we've earned or achieved, it's something that He has given to us. So when we have a virtue, when we achieve it, when we even make progress in our walk toward holiness, it is not something that we should be proud of. It is something that we should see as a delicate gift given to us by God. And how trusting He is to place that delicate gift in our hands when He knows that we aren't perfect, that we will sin again, and that maybe we'll get to the point where we don't even care about it. But God is such a good and generous and just devoted Father that He gives us these things. Also, let's talk quickly about how do we grow in these virtues? How do we grow in faith, hope, and love? Well, there's lots of things that can lead us deeper into virtue, but there's one that's more important than any of them. Remember, to become holy means to become more like God. And think about how you become more like the people in your lives. If you're in school, maybe you have some close friends that you play with every day at recess and sit with at lunch. Maybe you started to say the same words as them, or do the same jokes, or just generally act like them. Well, you start to act like people more when you spend more time with them. You learn to be like them. You learn to kind of behave the same way that they do. Well, the same is true with God. The more time that we spend with God, the more we will naturally become like God. So here is my challenge for you today, Sprouts. And I challenge you this more than any other challenge I have given you. And it's this. If you truly want to be holy and to grow closer to God, You need to spend time with Him. You need to spend time with Him daily, and it needs to be more than just what you do with your family at night when you pray together, or maybe in the morning over breakfast when you play with your family. As you get older, you need to really focus on giving Him some of your personal time. And I know that might sound like a big deal, but it can be very simple. When I was a child, as I was laying in bed before I fell asleep, I would simply say a couple of simple prayers in my head. In the quiet, in the dark, no one else was there. It was just me and God. I gave Him those quiet moments before I fell asleep. Instead of thinking about my day or dreaming about the presents I wanted, I simply gave Him those moments. And you can do that too. God would love to spend some quiet moments with you before you fall asleep. And so that is my challenge for you, Sprouts. Just 5 minutes in the dark when you're laying in bed before you drift off. Perhaps say an Hail Mary or an Our Father. Maybe just contemplate how good God is. But the more time you can spend with Him and Him alone, the more you will become like Him, and the more these virtues will take root in your life. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God intended you to be. One last thing, I'd like to invite all parents and teachers listening to this episode of the Catholic Sprouts to jump on over to YouTube and discover a new channel devoted just to you. Catholic Sprouts for Moms is going to be sharing weekly videos that will hopefully help to inspire you in your own faith journey and become better teachers of the children entrusted to you. That's Catholic Sprouts for Moms, and you can find the direct link in the notes for this episode.